From Columbia, in high definition, this is WIS News 10 Awareness.
As to count one, I will declare that mistried.
We, the jury, find George Zimmerman not guilty.
2 black Florida teens gunned down. The accused shooters, white men not convicted in their deaths. In both cases, that state's stand your ground law took center stage. Today, we'll take a closer look at that law and its South Carolina counterpart. Plus, the state of the black male in the wake of these 2 polarizing cases. Thank you for joining us for Awareness. I'm your host, Megan Norman. 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was shot and killed after a confrontation with George Zimmerman, a neighborhood watchman who followed the teen because he thought he was a criminal. Zimmerman was acquitted in Trayvon's death. Jordan Davis, also 17, was shot and killed by Michael Dunn after a fight over loud music. A mistrial was declared on the murder charge. Dunn was convicted of attempted murder and faces up to 60 years in prison. Now, there is an outcry of injustice in both cases. We want to take a closer look at Stand Your Ground and its relevance. Also, how the community can come together to protect young black teens. Joining the discussion today is State Representative Todd Rutherford, President of the Columbia Urban League, J.T. McLawhorn, and Pastor Andre Barnes of Mount Hermon Baptist Church in Bishopville. Thank you all so much for being here with us this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Now, Todd, let's talk a little bit about South Carolina's version of Stand Your Ground, the Castle Doctrine. What does it say?
South Carolina has almost what is identical to Florida's law, and there are two concepts. One is the Castle Doctrine, which says that you have a right to protect your home. Your home is your castle. That includes the curtilage around your home as well, so the yard around your home, anything that belongs to you. You have a right to protect that, and you don't have to retreat. You have a right to defend yourself. The Stand Your Ground took the Castle Doctrine and applied it to wherever you are legally standing. Any place you have a legal right to be, you have a right to defend yourself. Before that, you had a right to defend yourself, but you had to retreat first. You could not elevate the weapons. So if somebody only was beating you with their fist, you couldn't get a knife. You had to go back to the furthest place away, and you could have no part in bringing about whatever the fight was. What the legislature did, and at the behest of ALEC, and ALEC did this throughout the country. They started off in Florida, went to South Carolina and some other southern states as well. It said that wherever you have a right to be, you have a right to defend yourself. And I can tell you that I've successfully used this as a defense of a young man last year who was found immune from prosecution to a murder case. And I'm sure you'll see it this week as well in the prosecution of a young man in Lexington County on a murder charge as well. And I'll be using it there as well. The problem is not the law, in my opinion. The problem is the fact that there is a war on young black men, and that war elevates itself. Anytime a young black man is killed, the case goes to a jury, and the jury finds the person that did it not guilty. It has always been said that a black life, especially the life of a young black male, is worth less than other members of society, and those jury verdicts simply speak that.
Well, when you look at the 2 Florida cases of Jordan Davis and Trayvon Martin, do you think the law was suitable in those 2 cases?
George Zimmerman never did use the Stand Your Ground. It was talked about, but he
Right.
never did use that in his actual trial. In the Dunn case, there was never a hearing to determine whether a Stand Your Ground law would apply. In South Carolina, as in Florida, you have a right to a pretrial hearing. The defendant does, to say whether Stand Your Ground applies. It was a part of the jury charge, but it was not used as an applicable Stand Your Ground case.
You talked about the impact on black youth. I want to bring the others into our discussion. What message do these 2 cases send to our black youth?
Well, I think one of the challenges is it presents a picture of disparity. You know, get them before they get you, because that's going to be the mentality, you know, understanding that survival is a must. And if I'm in the right place where I have the right to stand my ground, did Trayvon have a right to stand his ground? Did the other young man see impending danger where they could stand their ground? They turned around and became the victims of someone that looked at them and said, this is not valuable. You are not valuable. You are a thug. I perceived you to be a thug because you have a hood on. Well, other people wear hoods too. Can I stay in my ground when I see the threat of someone coming in my space? And I think the message that I have to minister as a pastor is that your life is valuable and that you do matter, but you need to learn the law and you need to respect the law, and then you need to deal with your own presentation of self as well. Because just as sure as the deaths are wrong, we also have to take a look at the picture we present of ourselves as well. And so sometimes that can be touch and go because we don't sometimes want to own our part in some of the nonsense. Not justifying, what has happened to these two young men, but not excusing our role, if that's
Now,
sound
the
right.
youth that you work with, have they conveyed to you a fear of the system, so to speak, or what have they said to you in terms of the image now?
Well, they need to learn coping skills, because their first mindset is, if that had happened to me, I would have. Well, you don't know what you would do until you're in the situation. So we have to massage their ego to now learn to respect the law, because you can have people taking stuff into their own hands and becoming vigilantes, and then it's going to be it's already a war on our young African American males. Well, as a matter of fact, it's a war on the African American male, period. So the younger ones are responsible to hear from us, and we're responsible to speak to them.
You talk about respect, Mr. McLaughlin. Do you think teens, young black males, need to placate in a sense to stay safe?
No, I really don't think so. I think this law really legitimized racial profiling. Racial profiling is nothing new. It's been used over and over, but this stand your ground law legitimized racial profiling. It really reminds me of a bad law. Dr. King said that if the law doesn't have a moral basis to it, it's not a good law. And this is a man-made law that have had an adverse impact on our future African-American young people. I think we always talk about, what should we do? Maybe if he didn't have a hood on, maybe he wasn't playing loud music, he'd be alive today. Well, why should we, as a race of people, why should we accommodate everyone, in essence? I think there are some boundaries that we ought to be respectful of, but we're blaming the victim because he was playing music. We were blaming the victim because he wore a hood. I went into a department store several years ago, and I had a leather jacket on and a hat. And I was with my wife. We walked into this department store one evening, and the security guard reached for his firearm when I walked in. And of course, I pay my taxes. I teach Sunday school. I'm a good law-abiding citizen, but it didn't mean anything, We must begin to realize that what is going on with our young African-American men is wrong. And we must speak out against these kind of laws that would rob us of our future. And we talk with young men all the time about that you got to realize people would tell you that you can't judge a book by its cover, but people judge books every day by the way we look. So let's present ourselves too. But at the same time, we shouldn't be victimized. You see other groups of people, they dress all kinds of ways. But they're legitimized. I'm old enough to remember in the 60s, during the Civil Rights Movement, they had a group called the Weather Underground. And these were young white guys, they dressed, like, just tyrants, people, in essence. And I was at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. These guys, they were doing a lot of subversive kinds of activities, in essence. But, they were able to cut that long hair, take a good bath, put on a three-piece suit, and move into mainstream America, So let's recognize that this stand your ground law is a wolf in sheep clothing. And we need to call it for what it is, name it for what it is.
Now, Representative Rutherford, you said that the law is not the issue, or not the problem. Would you say race is really at the crux of this?
Right. What we need to repeal is racism. What we need to repeal is the attitude that suggests that young black men are always a problem. In South Carolina, in fact, in Richland County, the stand your ground law has been used, to my count, at least 7 times. Each one of those times it was used by an African-American defendant. So it is not a matter of race in Richland County, and maybe that's because Richland County Sheriff's Department only arrests black people, but it's only been used by black individuals in South Carolina. We have not had those issues. The 2 cases in Florida are bad cases, and bad cases make for bad law. This law simply says that you have a right to defend yourself, and anyone that suggests that you should not defend yourself is wrong. What would have been interesting is if Trayvon Martin shot George Zimmerman and then been able to use a stand your ground law, I don't think we'd be calling for its repeal, and he would have had an absolute right to do so. What would have been interesting is if the individuals in the Dunn case, the victims, and there were 5 of them in the car, if any one of them had shot him and killed him and then been able to avail themselves of stand your ground law, we wouldn't be calling for its repeal. And that's why I have been a staunch supporter of stand your ground, because it allows us, who are clearly under attack and have been under attack, not only by individuals that are racist, but also by the police. It allows us to defend ourselves and do so within the confines of the law.
Right. And Andre Barnes, the last thing I want to say before we wrap up this segment is, do you think that the youth need to be further educated on what's going on? Do you think they're aware of what's going on?
No, it's a must. Their music, their games, their whole life is set up to not succeed in the picture. The television tells them the vision. The leaders of our community must cast vision again, must remind them of our history, remind them of who they are and what they stand for. And we must not be afraid to touch our own. And nobody else is going to come and save us. Right. This is something that we must do. This type of conversation behind closed doors, maybe sometime without the media per se, so we can get down to what is really going on. This is a legalized lynching to me. It's an open hunt season on our African-American males, and we must have a voice. Thank you for the opportunity for us to be here to express it, but we must do it at a more tangible place and rate, because a lot of our young people won't come to the Urban League. They won't come sit down with representatives. We must go to where they are and then bring them into a safe place. May not be the church, might be a gym, but whatever we got to do, we got to touch them.
Well, thank you all so much for being with us and starting this conversation.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Well, these cases have changed the way black males view the world and their safety in it. A group of young men will weigh in after the break. Stay with Awareness on the state of the black male in light of Stand Your Ground. Welcome back. Being followed in a store, a woman clutching her purse tightly, a cab driver passing by, being stopped and frisked just because. These are all realities for young black men before the Trayvon Martin and Jordan Davis cases. Now they must face the added danger of being gunned down just because someone else feels threatened. We want to hear from young black men about how they're living in a stand your ground age. Joining us now is James Johnson, Junius Douglas, James White, and Chad Myers. Thank you all for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Now, I'm sure you're all aware of the Jordan Davis and Trayvon Martin cases. What do these cases mean to you? How do they impact you?
Just understanding that you have to be aware of your actions and what you wear. You have to be aware of how you present yourself. Not because of what you're trying to do, but because of how the world perceives you. And in effect, affects your progression in life, because you're always thinking about how the world perceives you, and you don't want it's like how what do I do, how do I progress, how do I make these changes towards my life without being prejudged on how I look.
Do you think the world judges black males as thugs?
Yes.
I think
James, you smile and laugh at that. Why?
I mean, it's all how you present yourself. I mean, if it's 3 o'clock in the morning and like I said, you're wearing a big hoodie and you're sagging your jeans, then, you know, I might clinch, you know, my girl next to me, you know, come on, walk on the side of the street. And the same game for a white guy. It's just all how you present yourself. And that's my personal opinion.
Well, you have the Stop Sagging campaign at Benedict College because you're trying to prove just that your image says a lot about who you are.
I think that, you know, it's good that, you know, we show protesters and everything like that, but how are we preparing these young men? Are we having big forums and, you know, great topics on how to have the black man to articulate themselves when the cop pulls them over? You know, just, I mean, if I get stopped by a cop, I know I'm going to articulate myself and say, I'm James Johnson, I attended Benedict College, I just graduated December, et cetera, et cetera. These young men, they get pulled and they're 17 years old and 18, they're emotional. Right. Well, I didn't do anything, you know, so what are we doing to stop that? What are we doing to, you know, help the cause?
What you just said, that assumes that the other person, let's take the Jordan Davis case, that assumes that person is going to give you time to articulate yourself. But in certain cases, people just, they act, they don't wait to see if there's a reason behind it.
So we have to have these, we have to teach them something. We have to do something. We can't just protest, say, you know, we have to do something that's, like I said, we won't know how to react, how the situation is unless we're in the situation. But I know for sure, people that I know, my peers, they react with emotion. Mm-hmm. They react with passion, you know, because why are you stopping me? Because of these cases, you know, they're terrified of what maybe the worst can happen. You know?
Now, Chad, do you conduct yourself any differently after these cases?
Me personally, no, I have not. But back to your point about how we're perceived, I think that in society, the black male is perceived as somewhat of a thug, because if all you've seen on TV on the news or young black men killing themselves. If I've never been exposed to a young black male or black people in general, I would think that, hey, that's the norm. And I think that the life of a black male and death has become, we've become desensitized to death, to killing in the United States, and particularly in the black community. And I think that we as a people must change. It changed with us. Some of it is fair criticism. We are killing each other. We need more self-love. It's a lot of self-hate going on in the communities. Every argument, every disagreement cannot end in bloodshed.
Right. Now, James, how do we target this problem? I mean, do you have to change yourself?
I think that there is a preconceived notion that black men may be violent, but there's also preconceived notions with the white race, with the Mexican race. We feel a certain type of way about it because it directly affects us. So everybody can make this argument. Let me first say that. Then I think that, take me for example. I try to keep a professional attire. I try to always, look like somebody that is doing something productive in the community, because I am doing something productive in the community. Now, I went to C.A. Johnson High School yesterday. I had a speaking engagement. These are the young men that I'm afraid for. I'm not afraid for myself because I carry myself, my disposition is very professional everywhere I go, but I'm afraid for the young men that are not educated. We're taking grade test scores in the 3rd grade and we're building prisons based upon that. That's what I'm afraid for.
Have any of you been in a situation where you were prejudged or racially profiled?
It's every day. Like the example you gave earlier, when you're walking down the street and someone switches sides, or you can look them in the eye and greet them with a smile, and the person will look away as if you didn't say anything. It's like, well, before you prejudge me, know that I'm 26 years old and I haven't been inside of a prison cell. I haven't been in a set of handcuffs. I'm not what the media portrays me to be, so please give me a fair chance.
And even though none of us on this panel may have been prejudged, because you're talking about 4 clean-cut, well-dressed individuals.
Been in college.
Right, but it goes on every day.
Right, it does.
And in our community, we're sometimes, and most of the times, we're judged on how we look first, then what we know. And that's not the same everywhere.
Right.
So we've got to be cognizant of that fact. And it's not fair, but it's what it is.
It's reality. All right, thank you all so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
When awareness returns, for others to excel in many avenues, there must be pioneers. Coming up, we'll hear from one of the women who helped break the color barrier right here at WIS. Carolyn Sawyer is this week's Modern Day History Maker. Welcome back to Awareness. You first saw Carolyn Sawyer's face on WIS in 1983. Since then, she's traveled the world as a journalist and for nearly the last 20 years as a businesswoman. Sawyer pioneered the way for many African-American women in this field. If it wasn't for women like her, I would not be here today. As we celebrate women this month, Carolyn Sawyer is this week's Modern Day History Maker.
I've always wanted to know. I wanted to know how, why does it work, how does it work? And so I always assumed I was going to be a writer for a newspaper.
But Carolyn Sawyer saw someone on television who changed her mind.
There was a correspondent on National Network News who had the most impeccable diction, and she covered the White House, and her name was Carol Simpson.
Good evening. President Carter and Soviet Foreign Minister Gromyko exchanged sharp words during 4 hours of talks on limiting strategic arms, but Gromyko said they made some headway.
That woman has it together. She looks like me, she kind of sounds like me, so maybe this is how I can take the funny sounding voice and the skills that I have as a writer and take it in the direction of broadcasting.
Carolyn started her career in Washington State, then moved south and anchored at WIS. She's worked in Atlanta, New York, and Boston. Through each market, she says she's maintained her standard of excellence despite the critics.
Some folks thought I couldn't do what I was doing and shouldn't be doing what I was doing, or I only was doing what I was doing because I was African American.
Carolyn has traveled the world and is proud of her accomplishments, but like most things in life, they came at a price.
I was in my 30s, and I had never married. I didn't have children. I had focused on a career, and the career was successful, and I was pleased with that. And so I married at 36, and unfortunately, my marriage didn't last very long.
Carolyn left WIS in 1996 and now heads her own communication firm, the Tom Sawyer Company.
People have often asked me, do I miss TV? And my immediate response has been no, because when I left TV, it was time. I felt like it was time.
She focused on her personal goals, becoming a network news anchor, like her idol, and is now moving on to the next chapter of life.
And life is about choices, and the choices you make, and you've got to be comfortable enough with those choices, so in the end, you might not have all the cards that everybody else in the room has. You might have a totally different hand, but you're okay with your hand. And that piece, I'm good with.
Carolyn says she wants to slow down a little bit eventually, but continuing to do what she loves. We'll be right back with a final thought. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said it best: injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. While both of the cases we've discussed today happened in Florida, a similar law is on the books here in South Carolina. The fate of both George Zimmerman and Michael Dunn was in the hands of juries of their peers and not in the court of public opinion. The fact remains, 2 African-American boys are dead after they were confronted, a sad reality parents must face. They must teach their black sons to be non-confrontational. Their lives just might depend on it. We would like to thank all of our guests this morning. Until next time, I'm Megan Norman. This is Awareness.